Originally these slides were on Google Slides because I didn't want any confusion with where are we downloading this from, is it too big or anything like that. So as the professor said in the introduction, my name is Camila. I went to school here back from 2016 to 2018, which we were just talking about. It didn't feel like it was that long ago, but it really has been, like, due to COVID, it's been like close to 5 years now. It's been a minute. I was in the global health department, which I love, and I love coming back here and seeing the new students. So today we're gonna talk about modernizing the learning experience. And I decided to talk about this in particular. First of all, it was gonna be my capstone for the fellowship that I'm in right now. But also because I realized as I'm working in informatics, there's a lot of people who don't realize that they are data scientists. And as public health practitioners, we're actually all data scientists, whether we like to admit it or not. Maybe you're working with qualitative data, maybe you're working with quantitative data, maybe you're working with both in a mixed method study. But even beyond that, all the programmatic work that we do, when we work on Excel, if you have a line item list of students and you need to combine it with another line item list of their last names, all that is data work. And it doesn't even need to be about a disease. It can literally just be names. So that's why I wanted to talk about upskilling people who maybe don't think of themselves as data scientists or data health professionals. These are not the views of CDC or Emory. Let's just, I want to say that off the bat. These are things that I've been thinking about in my mind, turning them over and over. I talk to mentors and supervisors about it. But please don't think like, oh, this is the stance of the CDC or this is the stance of Emory. As I mentioned, this was going to be my capstone. And then when I went to my capstone advisor, he said, you have enough here for a PhD dissertation. Let's narrow the scope a little bit. So we took a portion of this, and that's what's going to be my capstone for my fellowship. That being said, these presentations, we set these things up like a month ahead of time. So a month ago, this was going to be my capstone. Now it's being narrowed down. That being said, I still thought that the information in it was pretty cool. And when I talked to other people like Maria about it, a second year who's also into informatics, it sounded like it was a good blend of a little bit of BSHI, a little bit of global health, a little bit of data, statistics. And so I think we've created something that's relevant for everybody in the audience today. Let me start out by introducing to my family. That on the right for you guys is my dad, then my mom. In the white shirt is my twin sister, and I'm in the green shirt, and my older sister's in the middle. I like to start out my presentations talking about my family. First of all, it kind of lowers down everybody's guard a little bit, everybody's wall. Let's connect a little bit. This is my family. Hello. But also, I like to start my presentations with a little bit of a story. So this picture was taken back in like 1990 or 1991. And my mom had been posted in Puerto Rico. It was her first job out of vet school. And she was working with the federal government. She's a veterinarian, and she was working at like stables with horses and sheep and all that cool stuff. So here we are living in Puerto Rico, and my dad told me that they would spend one entire salary on the preschool that they were sending us to. One whole salary. And it was this Montessori school. Private school, apparently it costs a lot of money, every month for 3 daughters to be going there. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with Montessori, but Montessori is very much like a student-centered pedagogy. Very hands-on, very process-oriented. Every student is a special little flower that we need to nurture and make sure that they bloom. So I was in that system until 5th grade. And then all the way through middle school, high school, college, my parents made sure that we were in really good schools that had similar pedagogies. To the point that my undergraduate was at a school that had no grades at all. Like the students there, we were going there because we wanted to learn. That was the motivation behind that. So you can imagine when I came to Rollins, Emory, and I started my biostats class, and this is what happened to me. I was just like, they have given me 36 hours of work to do, and there's only 24 hours in the day. And I assume I should be taking at least like 6 of those hours to sleep, maybe another one to eat and go to the bathroom and do all that stuff. How do I make all this happen? I was really frustrated with the process. I mean, I learned biostats, I graduated, right? But I felt like we could have done better. I didn't think that it was necessary to be quite this frustrated, where you really have no other words. Like, I like to use this meme because it is funny, but there is a kernel of truth there, of real sad truth there, of like, you hit a wall where you're just like, I have nothing else to say but take the extra work that I've been given, cry into my cup of coffee, and keep hustling. Now, here I am, that was back when I was in 2016 through 2018. Here we are in 2023. These are screenshots of WhatsApp messages between myself and my colleague, who's my best friend over at CDC, Angela Hun. And I've taught her how to use Power BI, and now she is doing some of the easier projects that I no longer have to focus on because she knows how to do them. I want to draw your attention to the timestamps. I was in bed by 8 p.m. watching 90 Day Fiancé. This was this week. 90 Day Fiancé comes out on Sundays, Mondays, and Tuesdays. And on those days at 8 o'clock, I am in bed watching it and answering messages on my WhatsApp. That's my winding down routine for the night. I didn't answer her until 10:46 p.m. That's not good practice. Usually I would not advise that to any student. Leave work done. You're at home, you're doing your thing. I answered this message because what we were talking about was more interesting than 90 Day Fiancé. And she wrote to me at 8 p.m., long after she had logged off, because figuring out that dashboard was more interesting than whatever she does in the evening. So what's the problem here? Why do we start talking about things like learning data science is hard? Why do we have this perception? While on the other hand, I am answering a message from my colleague at 10:46 at night. There's no deadline that was happening. We weren't pressured, we weren't rushed, we weren't stressed out. We were literally going to the work because it was interesting and we wanted to learn more. And that's what we were talking about. I don't know why we have this perception. We're going to go into it a little bit. I think it's going to answer one of the questions. I'm not going to try and answer this question in its entirety. But I do think it's a perception that we see even on social media. This is another meme that I love to share. You know, I can identify with a vampire and Superman. We know those common lores, right? I busted out laughing when I got to the last part and it said data scientist, research, and math because that was me. I felt like I was an imposter in informatics. I was like, ooh, they don't know that I don't know how to do coding that well, but I'm really good at visualization. And then I see this, it's a meme, so it's telling me I'm not the only one with this feeling, right? So even data scientists are like, can I not do the research? Can I not do the math? Can I actually focus on the work? Can we leave the math to the epi, so to speak? And again, my question is why? Not to be too dramatic on it, but think back to our classes in math, algebra, geometry, calculus, biostats. I'm hyperventilating a little bit here thinking about those 2 midterms and then a final for epi and biostats. Those were not fun experiences. So in short, again, without being too dramatic, trauma. We've all suffered some sort of trauma at the hands of math in school. For one reason or another, whether the professor was just not good at it, whether we were in a bad place in our life, whether we were just overwhelmed with the other work we were doing, so we weren't able to give math the time that it needed. Again, without being too dramatic, we'll get into this a little bit more. Trigger warning, I want to get into a little bit as to why I'm talking to you guys about psychology in the first place. So after I graduated Emory, I did a year at CDC, and then I joined the Carter Center, and I went to North Africa. While I was in North Africa, I got in a motorcycle accident, I caught COVID, and I was assaulted at the hospital where I went for medical care. And so the Carter Center was like, goodbye, you're going back home. That was in February of 2021. I didn't have a job again until January of 2022. What I did in that in-between time, I had to take time off. The psychologists were like, there's no question about this. There's some big things that happen. Any one of those would have knocked out a normal person. You got 3 of them. You need to take time off. They diagnosed me with OCD and PTSD. They're like, you need to work on this. And working on those things meant rewiring my brain, rewiring about how I thought about a lot of things in my life, even like my negative self-talk that I was doing to myself. Not doing that anymore. I did a lot of therapy. And I learned a lot of these really interesting concepts that I was applying to my mental health. But then I started doing a little bit of research, and by that I mean I was talking to my therapists, and I asked them to give me a little bit more of the background on the biology. So jumping into the biology real quick, we've got our prefrontal cortex and our amygdala, right? Our amygdala is an alarm system. It regulates our fear and our anxiety. The doctors, MDs in the room, correct me if I'm wrong as I'm trying to explain this process, because it did take me about 1.5 years to put all these pieces together. We also have our prefrontal cortex. Most animals have an amygdala. That's like the primordial part of our brain. It's deep in there. It's between your ears. Lizards have this, right? The prefrontal cortex that's what's starting to define us as humans, right? We're able to make some more decisions. We can plan. We can have critical thinking. It also regulates the alarms that the amygdala puts out. So these two systems together work to identify danger, say it's danger accurately, and be able to work accordingly. So just to simplify it a little bit, this is the typical function of how these systems would work, right? You see a candle, there's no problem with a candle. It's not going to cause any issues. We're all good to go. But if we see a fire break out, we don't have the time to figure out too much there. You got to act quick. This system developed off of when we were on the savannas back millions of years ago. I don't know the dates. That's my physical anthropology. But we needed to be able to tell, ooh, leopard, and run, and our brain isn't fast enough to figure all that out, right? So the amygdala literally developed to get us to move quickly before our prefrontal cortex can regulate anything. So good function, right? Run away from the fire, go get help. Atypical function would be you see a candle, you start running away. There's nothing wrong with a candle. I mean, unless you have trauma associated with it, right? This is atypical function, is seeing mathing, seeing a dashboard, and getting scared. You might not even realize that it's happening. I noticed it was very slight. It was almost like just a change in the way I was thinking. I almost shut off my brain when biostats was starting. When they were talking about things in epi that were just too far beyond me right now because I was triggered, I stopped listening. This is an atypical reaction to talking about epidemiology, biostatistics. I've been hammering that in, by the way. We shouldn't be that scared of epi and bios and all that stuff. So atypical function, right? We see math, we see epi, we see bios, we remember all these bad experiences we have, so now it's trauma, and it triggers us into running away, or whatever our reaction is. I avoid. I stay in bed for like 4 or 5 hours in the morning. So basically, to summarize all this, when your prefrontal cortex is down because you've been triggered, it's really hard to learn. So it's not that learning statistics, bios, epi is hard. I wonder if we're just more overwhelmed with what's going on in our lives and in school, and our prefrontal cortex is unable to regulate those alarms anymore. So, an example. I got this snippet of code off of Python, chat GPT, and I literally asked it, give me a sample code that uses an aggregate function. That's all I told it. When it first came out with this, and I put it on the slides, and I was like, okay, let's practice. How are we going to explain this? I blanked. I was so nervous, and I wasn't even in front of you guys yet. And I was just like, oh my God, I've got 2 days to figure this out before I have to give a presentation on it. So common fears. We're worried that people are going to find us incompetent, right? We're worried like, oh man, what if they ask me to do this and I don't actually know how to do it? Which, by the way, in informatics, rarely do people know how to do stuff. They need to research it. You go to Dr. Google, as my mom would say, YouTube. So if we're talking about the need, how do we keep our PFC online when we're learning about data science? So that's basically what I'm trying to do at my job over at CDC, is how do we get people to not be scared about learning Power BI? They already are overwhelmed with work, right? And now the bosses have brought me in, leadership has brought me in, and they're saying, we need everybody to be putting their data on Power BI so that we can have a dashboard and as leadership be able to see our key performance indicators. Cool. Our office is like 80 people. You're asking me to get 80 people on board with data science when they're laboratorians. I'm in an office of laboratory people. They're PhDs, MDs. They've already studied for 15 years. The answer I have come to, and when I was trying to put all this together for my capstone, there was a lot of buckets and a lot of reasons, but it all boiled down to trust. Before I even sit down to have a conversation with somebody in my office about data and about learning, we are already friends. They are not meeting me for the first time when we have our first class. And so what I realized, people started coming to me, like teams that I wasn't even ready for them yet. I'm gonna see you guys in February. That's when I have time for you. February 2024. They're already coming to me and saying, hey, Camila, we heard that you're teaching classes on Power BI. Can we get in on it? New members to our teams are like, Camila, we heard that you give Power BI classes. Can I get in on it? They already know they have all this other work to do. I don't even have to chase them down. They're coming to me because the first thing I did with each one of my teammates was get to know them. I either asked them out for coffee, I asked for a Zoom or a Teams date, just who are you as a person? Why are you here? Why did you take this job? What's your role on the team? So 6 months, 8 months went by before I really actually started working with some of these teammates. But by the time we got there, they had already seen the quality of the work that I did, and they already knew me more as a person. And so they knew I wasn't gonna make fun of them. They knew I definitely wasn't gonna say no. If anything, they were gonna have to struggle to get away from me because I talk so much. And people in the audience can vouch for that. So building trust, it happens not just with your colleagues, it also happens with the instructor. You gotta trust that instructor is not gonna make fun of you, right? When you forget that one thing you should know, that instructor should not be saying, you should already know that. Like I was thinking the other day, do you guys remember the commutative property or the transitive property in math? You actually do. It's the ones that say A plus B is equal to B plus A. And then if A plus B is equal to B plus C, then A equals C. We learned that in like 5th grade. I literally used it yesterday, working with a colleague on very advanced Power BI functions. But there was already that trust of like, he doesn't need to feel embarrassed because he didn't remember those things. We're just sitting there talking. We're just every week we have a meeting for an hour and we try to figure out how to get this dashboard that he's working on up and running with making it as sustainable as possible as well. So moving on, these are some of the things that I do. If you came trying to get some tips and tricks on how to learn data science, this is a slide for you. My favorite ones are these 3, oddly, because a lot of people want those quick fixes. If you want the quick fix, you know, ChatGPT and DataCamp are the ones that I usually suggest to people. And if we have time, I would love to show you guys what I was doing on ChatGPT because it really does bring everything together. Positive reinforcement. Professor, I think you can vouch for the fact that a lot of people have imposter syndrome. And it takes time to push past it. I have been giving one of my colleagues positive reinforcement since March. Just this past week, she started believing what I was saying. It took the leaders in our office to also say good job. And then that's when she was like, oh, you weren't just lying to me, Cami. You weren't just like giving me positive reinforcement to like inflate my ego or whatever. No, it's accurate. What you're doing is really good. You know, you don't have to be doing the most technically like difficult thing in the world to do a good job. It could be a simple thing. And to give your colleagues positive reinforcement is everything. That's what my dad said. Children learn best with positive reinforcement. That's how he raised us. So the people in the audience know I am always giving positive reinforcement. Everybody's always amazing. Bravo, well done. Because you are already being hard on yourself. The person on the other end of the line learning Power BI is already intimidated. They're already with those common fears of like, oh my God, what if she discovers I don't know something? So let's coach them along with positive reinforcement. No grades. Professor, please don't get upset at me, but I do feel like studying data science for a grade diametrically opposed to each other because learning data science is making mistakes. It's going in there and pressing buttons, going into Word, going into PowerPoint, just pressing buttons and see what happens. That is the process of learning data science. If I'm doing it for a grade, I don't want to make mistakes. I want to get an A. I'm an overachiever. I want to get an A, even though I don't care about grades. When somebody does ask me about my grades, I want to be able to say I got straight A's, which I didn't here at Emory. I got like 3 B's. But if you take that whole grade part away, or no final project, CDC loves to have symposiums for us. I'm doing a data science upscaling course at CDC, and they're having us do a symposium of our projects at the end, which is just like, all right, well, now instead of focusing on learning, I'm also focusing on putting out a deliverable, which is splitting the concentration of our brain. And I don't want my students I'm already competing with a phone, you know, with emails that are coming in, with chats. Like, I don't need to be adding something else to it. And then metaphors. I'm gonna go a little deeper into what metaphors are. Can somebody tell me the time though? Where are we? Oh, we got time. Okay, good deal. Since we have time, does anybody want to know anything else about the ones I have up here? Like, for example, what I say when I mean a work group, my most advanced group of students at work, colleagues, I should call them, every week we have an hour, and we're not exactly sure what we're going to discuss in that hour, but it's usually I'm bringing a problem that I saw that week when I was working on Power BI or Python or whatever. And I put it to the group, and I'm like, okay, guys, this is due for me and Angela next week. This is what we were working on. This is what we figured out. You guys got any ideas? Sometimes they have ideas. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're just learning what we did. Like one time we were figuring out DAX functions, and Angela and I figured it out, but we wanted to make sure the rest of the group knew it too. So when we did that group that week, it was a whole hour of us just reviewing what we had already figured out. We didn't know all the answers, and one of our other colleagues was actually able to fill in some of the blanks. But when I do things like that, what I notice is that, and we're going to talk about the theoretical foundations to all of this later on, but the same way, Maria, I can't say this man's name properly, Paulo Freire, who did Pedagogy of the Oppressed, right? He talks about creating trust between the instructor and the student so that you're actually co-learning. You're co-creating. That's what's happening in these work groups. At that point, I'm not the instructor anymore. I don't have the answers. That's why it's a work group. If I had the answers, it would be more of a lecture. But it's a work group because I don't have the answers. And so that gives my colleagues an opportunity to step up and give me answers. So we flip the model around. Now they're the ones teaching me. I don't know exactly why, but going through that process helps to build that trust. Now they're more willing to speak up. They're more willing to put their ideas forward because they know that it's going to be respected. It's not just going to be like, oh, yeah, good job, but oh, wow, yeah, I like that way. Let's do it that way instead. And you never know where those projects might end up. They might end up at leadership's table. Anything else on here since we had time? Varied methodologies. We don't just do lectures. I also send readings and YouTube videos. So if I need to take a week off, or we need to take 2 weeks off, which happens sometimes, right? Like, oh no, that week we're too busy, something's happening, that person's in training, this person, we can't meet that week. What I'll do is every day, I'll send the students an email and I'll say, set a timer for 20 minutes and go down this rabbit hole. And I'll give them a link of something I know is interesting to them because we've talked about it. And I tell them, just go down that rabbit hole. 20 minutes though. That's it. That's all you're doing. You got to build that trust, like we were saying before. You got to build that trust with the self. If you keep telling yourself 15 minutes, and you just keep going, eventually your brain's not going to believe you anymore. Every time you say 15 minutes, your brain's like, huh, yeah, that means 5 hours. Thank you. So here we go back to this example that I was going to give you guys earlier. So here we go. Here's the snippet of code, right? Looking at it right now, does this point? Can I point with this? No. And I don't want to go too far away from the mic. So at the top, we've got what we all know if we do SAS, right? Libname. But with something like Python, we actually have to start with importing packages. I believe that's what a panda is. I'm not entirely sure. Then after that, we're creating a data set. After that, we're telling the program, treat it as a data set. That's what a data frame is. Maria, am I right so far? Yeah? Then we do some calculations, BMI. I'm not a mathematician, so I don't know if that's the right formula, but I got it from ChatGPT and I would double check it. But it looks kind of right. I kind of remember what the BMI formula, you do something to an exponent, and there's an exponent there. Something's getting divided. Like, it looks accurate. That whole part with the data frame, I don't know why the syntax is like that. I can't tell you that. I would not be able to explain that right now. I know print at the end. We always print. I think we print in SAS too, right? So I'll show my students something like this, freak them out for a second, and then we flip the model around and we show them everything they do know about it. So in Python, every data language has that key vocabulary. I think they're called reserved words, that you can't use that as like your variable name. It's used very specifically in this way in this language program, which, by the way, is another way when I talk about metaphors. I tell students data science is like languages. It has syntax. It has vocabulary. It has a way that it is structured. And if you don't use it that way, you're not communicating properly with the computer. The same way, if you don't get your tones right in Mandarin, then you're not communicating properly to a Mandarin speaker. I also show them that we do actually know about punctuation. Strings, that's a hard one. I was a hard one to learn, but once I learned it, strings are always going to be in some form of quotation, whether it's single or double. And then when you're creating some sort of data set, of course you're going to have brackets. Brackets is another form of parentheses, right? And we know we use parentheses all the time in coding. Then at the very least, we know there's a syntax there. We might not be able to explain it, but you know there's a very specific way you need to bring in this data frame. So when you get to this point, when you're working, you might not be able to pull it out of your head, but you can go to ChatGPT and ask it how to do it, or DataCamp if you have your cheat sheets in DataCamp. And then more vocabulary, right? We all know what a mean is, and we all know what print is. So by the time we're done talking about it, I'll take a solid 15, 30 minutes to talk about it with the students. By the end of that lesson, the student goes away feeling less anxious, like they actually know something. They might not be able to write this out by themselves right now, but if they stick to it regularly, which is a structure we've already set up with them by meeting every week, they will get somewhere. Eventually, time will pass, the summer will pass, and eventually we'll get to a point where I can point to the student and be like, look at what you're doing. It's been 6 months, you've met with me almost every week for an hour, and look at where you are now, where you at the very least can translate code like this, meaning you are a data scientist. This is my job. It's basically, in French we say à la base, and that means like the crux of my job, right? People can teach themselves a lot of things. The crux of my job is getting them to believe that they can actually do it. Once they believe it, it's smooth sailing. That's when it's like, okay, well, now you go do this dashboard for comms because I don't have time to do it. And that's when you end up getting a lot of people in the office, not just capacitated, but empowered. They know they can do it, and they can pull it out in other situations as well. So real quick, the theoretical foundations that I was using: pedagogy of the oppressed, technology acceptance model, and diffusion of innovation. How much time do we have, Professor? 20 minutes? Okay. I want to leave time for questions, and I also want to leave everybody like 10 to, so people can leave. So pedagogy of the oppressed, Maria and I love to talk about pedagogy of the oppressed. Paulo, I'm sorry, guys. It's too many languages in my head. Paulo Freire. So he wrote Pedagogy of the Oppressed. How many people have read it? I assume yeah. Okay, so for the people who have not read Pedagogy of the Oppressed, at the very least, go down a rabbit hole on Wikipedia. The things that this man says about education, you're just like, what? You have to stop and put it down because it's overwhelming. But mainly what he's talking about is creating trust between the students and the instructors. The students usually being seen as the oppressed community. So that's why it's such a good model, because you can take Pedagogy of the Oppressed and you can use it when you're talking about underserved communities. So the underserved community is usually the oppressed party, whereas the party coming in with the knowledge is the one doing the oppressor, so to speak. So the novel or the book works on multiple levels. But that's really what I take out of it, is the fact that the best learning is co-learning, is when you're actually co-creating knowledge together. Because then the teacher is engaged, they're learning new things, and the student is engaged because they feel like they're a valuable part of what's happening. So that's Pedagogy of the Oppressed. The technology acceptance model, I'm not going to go into it too much because I don't have to since I'm not writing the capstone on this. But it centers around these two ideas of perceived usefulness and perceived ease of use. So when you're introducing a new technology to a community and you want to see how well has it been accepted, think about using this model because it pinpoints these two things. Obviously, there are these other variables that influence it as well, right? Norms, output quality, how relevant, there's all these other factors, right? But they bucket these two factors, or these factors into these two big buckets. Perceived usefulness, do I think I'm gonna be able to use this technology for something? So a lot of times when I'm at work, I'm working with PhDs, MDs, right? They graduated 20 years ago. They would rather go back to Skype. I will show them how to use Planner in Teams as part of my project. And then by the end of the meeting, they're saying, Camila, could we bring you into this other project? Because I think we might want to use Planner this way. That's literally my job, is getting people to maximize the use of Microsoft Office products because CDC has license for all those things. So perceived usefulness and then perceived ease of use. Is it going to take me a lot of time to figure it out? Or is it intuitive? Is it like my Apple phone, which I've seen babies open Apple phones because they're so crazy intuitive. iPad, same thing. We've made them a little bit more complicated now with the passcodes and stuff, but like when they first came out, I saw babies crawling over and opening that. It was so easy to use. And then finally, diffusion of innovations, which I know we talk about here at school. Who's heard about the diffusion of innovations? Oh, well, okay, well, this is the normal distribution, what we studied in bios, right? And so when you talk about any kind of technology, even ideas, concepts, you have your innovators, your top 2.5%. Those are the people usually creating the technology, Steve Jobs, the visionaries, right? And then you have your next group, your early adopters. My dad is in that group. As soon as iPhone came out, you know, it used to be, I don't know how young everybody's in the room, but I remember when iPhone was an iPod, and then the phone was separate. When it came together, I was like, this is ridiculous. Who needs to be able to have their phone on hand that much? My dad went out and got himself a phone immediately. He was like, this is brilliant. I can put on a headset and I can talk on my way to work. He would commute an hour to work. So, early adopter. I consider myself a late majority, even though I'm in informatics. I don't like the cloud. I refuse. I finally put all my things up in the cloud, but they're backed up on my computer. That's the generation I came from. If you didn't save your stuff on the hard drive and then you lost your thesis, that's on you. You should have known better. These days, I see people just put things up in the cloud, and it gives me anxieties. I'm like, why are you doing this? We're going to lose all our work. But, that's the modern world that we live in, so I have to modernize. I have to catch up with everybody else. Your laggards, not to stereotype, but it's usually, that 60-year-old in the office who really, he's just looking for retirement. He, she, they are looking to retire. It's 2 years before the retirement. You're coming to them with teams, and they're like, okay. And they're not in it anymore. There's also some people that just don't like technology. Like my mom, she used to run sections of the world with USAID, USDA. But she's a complete laggard. Anything happening with technology at the house. Like I'm happy I live in Atlanta precisely so I can go up to Sandy Springs and fix her internet whenever she disconnects the modem. It's simple things like that. Like, Mom, if you unplug to vacuum, you got to plug it back in order for it to work. She has literally bought herself a new TV because she couldn't figure out how to turn on the old one, which was disconnected because it got disconnected after somebody vacuumed. So those are your laggards. So in summary, let's build more trust. Let's build more trust with each other, with our professors, with ourselves. Go to therapy. See you, professor. Seriously, go to therapy. Like if you're not already in therapy, go get some screening. I was 34 years old when I got diagnosed with OCD and PTSD. Nobody would have thought. Everybody was just like, oh, Camila's tightly wound. She really knows her details. She gets emotional. And it's like, oh no, she's getting triggered. Oh, and when she gets triggered, it's harder to learn. Once I figured all those things out, learning was fun. It was easy, actually. Like when I hear people say, oh, learning Python on your own is difficult, I'm like, wait, what? It wasn't for me, but I had nothing else on my plate. I literally had 10 months. I was sick. I was physically sick, so I couldn't literally hold up my head for more than like 20 minutes. But I found ways to make sure I was working on this every day. And I think I did it for about 6 months. That's when I applied to CDC for the informatics fellowship. And a year later, I was working there. So I was not your typical quantitative student. The audience can vouch for me. I was very much a qualitative student. But within a couple months, I turned it around because the stressors in my life were health stressors that were getting taken care of. And reprogramming my brain was something I already had to do for my psychological health. So I just reprogrammed it to not be scared of data science. So that's it. Any questions? I don't know where we are on time. Yeah, we got maybe like a couple minutes if there's any questions. Oh, thank you. I can't read if there's any questions online. So if anybody has put anything in the chat, I can't read it. But yeah, go for it.
If I understood correctly, you taught yourself Python. How did you do that?
Good question. Good question. My cousin is about 25 years old, and she taught me about TikTok. I didn't know about TikTok before. And she showed me this TikTok back in like 2021. And it was this kid, this like punk, like 22 years old, like hadn't shaved, clearly personal hygiene was like the last thing on his mind. And he was like, oh, I taught myself data science and now I'm earning 6 figures. And I was like, wait, what? And then I found out about another friend who I guess I didn't have the highest expectations of her. And she was doing SQL like it was nothing. So perspective. I saw other people who were doing it and I was like, well, let me try it. And it was a slow start. You know, it wasn't like I did it every day the first month. I would do it one day and then I would lag for a week. But then once I got into it, I'd aim for every day. So even if I did it for 3 times a week, that was still better than no times a week. Through social media, I found a lot of accounts to follow. Codecademy is a free resource that will walk you step by step. So code, and then like you, as if you were going to spell academy, but drop the A. So Codecademy. So that's free. Data Camp is the one I prefer. It is like 20 or 30 bucks a month, but the investment for me is way worth it. I reference it weekly. So if CDC would pay for my subscription, cool. But even if they don't, I'm willing to take the hit because it's just so amazing. If you have some extra money and time, so, you know, over the summer, maybe you are overseas doing your APE and you finish and you don't want to come back to America and you want to stay in Mozambique or South Africa, wherever Maria was this summer, just get yourself a subscription of Data Camp or ask me for mine. And it's fun to just not have anything to do for the day, especially when you're as busy as we are, right? So I would encourage you guys, especially if you're first years, take a month, don't come back home. Stay where you are when you're doing your APE. Stay there and learn the data there because it's relaxing. It feels like you're on vacation, right? You're like, let me go get some piña colada or something and study Data Camp on my phone, which you can do. So imagine having a piña colada and studying. Way more relaxing than coming home to America and paying rent. But there's finances involved with that, right? So those are the 2 main avenues, but those avenues came with, the beginning of it was a perspective change. Was like, wait, these people are doing, I can do it. And I had time and, you know, that whole story. But as far as specifics, those 2, I think, would be good starting points for you. Yeah, good question. Thank you. Yeah, go for it, Marie.
It's a lot, so you're ready to like scale.
So this is the same comment I got at CDC. How do you scale this whole?
Yeah, like there's ways, and I think this perspective part, another strategy is bringing like other people that already did it, and it's like are normal people, and then showing that there are strategies, but just I've been thinking of this because it's part of my job, like data literacy for 300 people.
Yeah, so. I've got 2 answers for you. The tips that you can implement right now is and you guys can vouch for this, I engage you guys on social media. So I tell you guys, follow me. And the things that I put on there are personal about my life. You guys see things personal about my life. Me and teasing my husband or something like that, right? But I also put data science things on there. By the time I actually sit down with a student to talk, they know more about me. I know more about them. So again, it's not the first time we're seeing each other. If you have to do it at the drop of a hat, like you don't know your audience before they sit down with you, I talked about my family. By the way, Mandy Cohen, the CDC director, she talks about her family when she starts a presentation. So it's not unprofessional. But then the second thing that I did, I put humor in there. And humor, this speaks to my audience. I knew I was going to be in front of kids. Like if I could have a TikTok video here, it would be even better. I'm like 5 years behind putting a meme on here. Like, who are you engaging? And let's make sure, not simplifying the language, we're not dumbing anything down. We're translating what we're saying into a language that is palatable to the audience, which we do in data visualization. If we're gonna go work in China, are we gonna write left to right? How do we write in China? Top down, right to left. So building trust, you can do it with little things like this, even at the beginning. Now, that being said, one of the other things that I put later on here, I think I might have taken it away, is small. Yeah, so work groups and case studies, small classroom sizes. I don't like to have more than 3 students. And I know that that limits things like classes, right? If you have 60 students you have to teach and you're limiting it to 3 people per class, logistically, it gets complicated. What I'm willing to say, I don't have an answer to that, but what I am willing to say is that that is a tenet I am unwilling to budge on. I think a lot of people know that to be true. We know that, the teacher to student ratio, it is known. But given the logistical issues, we usually budge on it. What I am proposing is do not budge on that. Figure out another way. We're being innovative here. How can we get a large number of people capacitated in a way that is not painful? So far, what I'm noticing, my volunteer work here at Emory, recruiting people for the informatics fellowship, students are finding out that they're more capable than what they realized, what they gave themselves credit for. So I would say that if I were to be a teacher here, I would be talking to my first years way before they saw me in class. I would make sure I would be at orientation. I'd make sure I'd reach out to them and make sure I'm making meetings with them. Flip the model around. That's what you would do with a professor, right? That's what I want my students to be engaged. I want them at 8 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, to be messaging somebody back because they want to, because it's engaging. They've chosen to do this. They can choose not to do it too. It's a cool layout, right? We're not stressing out here. If I didn't answer her till the next day, she wouldn't have freaked out. It's WhatsApp, not Teams, right? Like we're chatting like friends. So that's usually my goal. My goal is to get people to voluntarily come to me wanting to learn, because that's the hardest part right there. Once the motivation is there, everything else is downhill. It's kind of like, getting your guys' attention at the beginning of this presentation. That was the hardest part. I've barely thought about my heartbeat since. Any other questions? Concerns? Anxieties? I always end my meetings that way. I do. I end my meetings. I ask people if they have anxieties or concerns. I specifically use those words. Because a lot of times people think like, oh, well, I don't have anything professional to say. Okay, but what's your anxiety? Are you worried that somebody's going to discover that you don't know how to do that? Cool, let's talk about it. We got time. I got time. Not always, but a lot of times I do have time. Or I'll make time. This is filling my cup. Coming here and volunteering with you guys fills my cup. I wish more people would do it. But people are busy too. Concerns? Anxieties? Do you want to close us out? There's nobody else higher ranking here, more senior than you. You, yeah. Does somebody else want to close this out? I can close this out.